Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you all are doing well today. We're going to talk about a couple things that have happened over the last week in watches. I think there's some cool stuff that's happened, kind of a range. No real sort of specific topic that we're going to talk about today. Really just want to bring your eyes and ears and give you guys some stuff that might be interesting for you to look at. I've really enjoyed this podcast, I have to admit. It's been pretty fun this year, kind of thinking about the things that I want to talk about. Whether it's auction related or new watch related, it's been tons of fun. So I just wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for all the support. Really appreciate it. So I'll start off with a really great video I recommend you check out that was done by Revolution Watch, and that was a sort of interview gathering of some really well-known people in the watch industry to talk about Cartier and the rise and success of them. So what happened was Waco sat down with CEO Cyril Vigneron, Alvaro Montanari, Eric Koo, and Shari Rahman to talk about various things relating to Cartier watches. I think the video is about 20 minutes. I really encourage you to take a look at it. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check it out. But it really was insightful and pretty nice to watch. It kind of reminded me of the talks, of the old YouTube, I'll say, where it was just a really nice sort of refreshing take on talking about watches. I saw some really interesting comments on the video though, where there were these people saying that, you know, now that Rolex has sort of leveled off in prices, people are trying to sort of boost the prices of Cartier as like the new Rolex and the new hype watch. It's kind of an interesting comment from people. I saw some stuff about Cartier destroying pieces. I don't know the validity of any of that stuff, but it was interesting to see the pushback, if I'm completely honest, on all that stuff. I personally think that the people that were in the interview in the room are incredible collectors, and you know, a great example is Alvaro Montanari. He's one of my absolute idols when it comes to watch collecting. He's loved Cartier for a very long time. Hasn't just been for this for a little while now. So it didn't make any sense to me why he would, you know, for lack of a better term, push this brand. He's a collector at heart, and he realizes the significance and the collectability of Cartier, and I think that's really what it was talking about. So highly encourage you to check out that video. Obviously there'll be a link in the show notes for that. Sticking with Revolution, there was a really cool watch that they came out with, which was a Vulcain cricket called the Style Moderne for Revolution and the Rake. It's a two-tone Vulcain cricket, which really takes a lot of its inspiration from Art Deco design. I've said this before on the channel. I think the alarm complication is in my opinion, one of the most underrated, underlooked, underhyped complications out there. I'm a huge proponent of the Le Coultre Memovoxes. I personally think that they're underrated. If you think about the mechanisms that go into them, it's a striking mechanism, right? And it's very similar to things like minute repeaters or repeater watches in general, just in a different form. And I think they're brilliant. And it was a cool take on the Vulcain cricket. Obviously, you know, I think they were released in late 1940s. Or I can actually read it here if you'd like. The handsome timepiece dates back to 1947 when it was introduced as the world's first mechanical alarm watch. It achieved this with the use of two barrels, which are the coil springs that act as power sources for the watch. So they basically released this in 1947, had a lot of success, but sort of these watches died down, especially during the quartz crisis. There's a whole variety of Vulcain crickets, and I think it's actually extremely collectible as a watch. I think the industry sort of knows that as well. I don't want to say the prices of them are where they should be, but you can say that there's enough interest in them to sort of create that, given the type of horology used, the finishing used, and the movements, etc. So what the Rake did was partnered with Vulcain to come out with this Art Deco inspired watch that has a really beautiful clean dial, applied 3, 6, 9, 12 hour indicators, your alarm function around the outside of the watch. It's a really beautiful piece. I encourage you to take a look at it. I think it's a complication that not enough brands are using today as well, and so yeah, I think it's a pretty cool piece. It's going to be limited to 50 pieces. I think they're around 4,000 USD. So it's a nice part of our history for Vulcain, pretty cool part of Revolution in the Rake as well. A brand that's a personal favorite of mine, I'll be talking about MB&F. They released the LMX Paris edition, which is a dedicated LMX for Laurent Piguet, who is the founder of the watch retailer Chrono Passion. If you don't know, MB&F started pretty recently, and Max Busser is sort of at the helm. He worked with a lot of retailers to sell his pieces really early on, and obviously these crazy designs were out there for the time period. And so when he had to show someone this design, it's very difficult to find a retailer who's going to buy these pieces for him up front. So in order to do this, he went to many retailers, one of those being Chrono Passion. And it's really, Chrono Passion was, and I'll sort of read this off the article that I'll link in the show notes, but Piguet was just one of the 6 retailers who believed in Busser's vision and took a chance on him by paying 30% in advance for the horological machine number 1. When it was still 2 years from completion, Piguet provided Busser with the capital to survive and empowered Busser and friends, who would eventually change the entire landscape of independent watchmaking. Since then, Chrono Passion and MB&F have shared in many exuberant successes, and Chrono Passion even opened up one of the world's first MB&F labs in the world on Rue Saint-Honoré in Paris in 2022. So in order to dedicate one of these pieces to Piguet, who was a huge enthusiast for motorcycles, electric guitars, and rock and roll, they came out with this MB&F LMX with a beautiful purple dial. It really is a stunning piece. And it will be limited to 15 pieces, which I think is really nice. The LMX is the latest sort of dedication to the Legacy Machine line, and with the recent success that MB&F has had in awards at GPHGs, and really the success of having people people sort of paying attention to the brand, I think it's a really great dedication. The purple is really intense. It's got this really beautiful sort of sunburst hue to it. Highly recommend you taking a look at these pictures because it really is a beautiful piece. Limited to 15 pieces. I think this is probably going to be one of the more rare ones, and people are going to like them. Tag Heuer released a set of 3 Monaco skeleton dial pieces for the Monaco Grand Prix. If you didn't know, the Monaco Grand Prix for the Formula One took place this past weekend. It was a great event. Tag Heuer had a couple of events on show with their sort of relationship with Red Bull Racing. I saw some pictures of it on Instagram. It was pretty cool to see. But they released these skeleton Monacos, which is really cool. One sort of has this dark blue navy motif to it. One has a black and sort of light blue turquoise motif, and then the last one is a gray case with a black motif to it. What's really cool is this isn't actually a limited edition, so you have titanium. These are titanium cased watches with a different sort of sandblast for each of them. They're not limited in production, and they use the Heuer 02 automatic movement, which is typical. You are going to pay a little bit of a premium for the titanium, but you're looking about 11,000 Swiss francs for the most expensive one, and they're available now. So pretty cool trio. I think the Monaco is something that they should build on, and it actually doesn't remind me of anything that they've done in the past, besides obviously the Monaco that's taking inspiration for, but it is a new sort of take on the Monaco, which I think is really important for the brand to continue to innovate in that sense. I personally would go for the sort of black and turquoise one. I think it's pretty attractive and reminds me of sort of the Dark Lord vintage Monacos that are very, very popular. If you don't know, Verstappen did take P1 for the Monaco Grand Prix, so it was a big day for Red Bull Racing, but also for Tag Heuer. I will say Alonso had a really great race, and I'm so glad that he's keeping the field competitive, and definitely shows the kind of racer that he is. Moving on, Audemars Piguet released the newest Marvel Comics collaboration, this time the Royal Oak concept Tourbillon Spider-Man. So if you didn't know, Ben Amias, who is the current CEO of François Ben Amias, who's the current CEO of Audemars Piguet, he's stepping down at the end of the year, is a huge enthusiast for pop culture. And so one thing that he released was the Black Panther concept tourbillon, which was a Audemars Piguet Royal Oak tourbillon with a image of Black Panther on the dial. Now this was real hit or miss when it came to watch enthusiasts. Either you loved it or you hated it. Either way, it really made it was a statement piece for sure. I apologize if you hear the sirens in the background. But after the release of the Black Panther concept, obviously the natural thing to think about is, are there going to be future editions of this that are going to be released? Well, they did it. They've released the Spider-Man edition. This time is a skeleton Tourbillon Royal Oak concept in a 42mm titanium case. The watch has a 3D Spider-Man character that is hand sculpted and hand painted. I have to admit, it's pretty nice that they're continuing this sort of this trend. It'll be interesting to see after Ben Amias if this continues. So they've used the Black Panther. Now they've got the Spider-Man. Are they going to choose another part of the Marvel comic book series and release someone like that? I guess it's up to the new CEO and the board, but it is interesting to see. I think this is going to be met with similar positivity and also maybe skepticism as the Black Panther. Either way, it is a collectible piece. I think it's a concept tourbillon, so it's not going to be in too many pieces. I can look here. Yeah, so it's limited to 250 pieces. So yeah, it's going to be very collectible. For some reason, I keep thinking about what's going to happen in 50 years when these are hitting the auction block and people are trying to collect the Marvel AP tourbillons. It's going to be quite interesting to see. Quickly, I wanted to mention the Tourbillon DB28 Starry Seas, which is basically a version of the DB28, just in a smaller case. It also has this really beautiful sort of wavy dial, which I think is really nice. I watched a really great video of the Watches TV. I encourage you, if you don't know the Watch TV, check out their podcast or check out their YouTube channel. But he had the opportunity to have one of these in the metal. He had it on his wrist. And when you compare this to the normal DB28, it's way smaller. And I think with independent watches, you kind of have to get used to the fact that you're going to have something maybe a little bit larger on your wrist. Maybe not. Some independent watches, I think that maybe is a broad statement. Some independent watch companies are not going to have that. But it is something that you have to keep in mind. But yeah, so they released this watch. I think it's 39 millimeters in diameter, which is a step down. And based on what I saw in the Watch TV video, it really fits quite nicely on the wrist. The dial is also fairly unique, and I think that's another sort of interesting point on this piece. Obviously, you're getting everything that you can imagine with Tourbillon, and I encourage you to explore the brand if you haven't. Big news from the sale of the Imperial Patek Philippe, which is owned by the last emperor of China. I know I'll keep this short because I'm sure that the coverage of this has happened pretty substantially. But the Patek Philippe that I have mentioned in a past, I think we did an article and a YouTube video on this. But Philips in Hong Kong sold the Patek Philippe reference 96 QL that was owned by the last emperor of China. It was part of a imperial auction that they did with a lot of his other goods, sort of his possessions, and the watch sold for 48.85 million Hong Kong dollars, which is about 6.2 million US dollars. It's the most expensive watch to sell at auction so far in 2023 and is the 8th most expensive vintage watch ever sold at auction. So a big result. It's funny, I saw some interesting comments on some of the videos and Instagram posts where people basically said, well, this watch was essentially destroyed by the last emperor of China, where basically there's this whole thing where the bottom half of the dial is kind of scratched up, and apparently Puyi asked one of his advisors to figure out what the actual dial of the watch was made out of, and so they started to scratch off the dial to see what was underneath it, to see if it was a specific metal. So what you actually have is two halves of this dial. That one is sort of the white original dial color that it was, and then underneath you had the sort of brown dial color. And there was a lot of interesting comments that I saw where people were saying, okay, so if I destroy the dial of my watch, it's worth nothing, it's worth less, but if a famous person does it, then it's worth something. And it's interesting because then people start talking about provenance, and how that kind of is the definition of provenance, that the last emperor of China said, I want to know what it is, and that adds a story to this watch. Kind of an interesting concept to think about. I don't think people can kind of spin stories where they destroy their watches and then sell them for more, but regardless, I think it's a big result in a nice part of horological history. Last thing I want to touch on is Nomos. They announced a lineup of the Orient Neomatic to celebrate 175 years of watchmaking in Glashütte. It's a pretty young brand that comes out of Glashütte, but one that has really taken the world by storm. I've recommended it to several people as a great entry-level watch company because of the finishing and design that they've been able to sort of master. It's true Glashütte sort of design, real Bauhaus down to all the details, the thinness of the automatic movement, the design of the dial, indices, date, wheel, those types of things. They released this new Orient Neomatic watch in 36, 39, and 41 millimeters, all limited to 175 pieces. There isn't a whole lot I can say about this piece. It's Nomos to a T. It's the Neomatic to a T. Some nice some nice yellow accents on the watch. Long lugs, so they make the watch sit quite nicely. Stainless steel case. It really is beautiful. The indices are actually gold, so not just yellow in color. When you flip it over, you have a really beautiful look at the display case back and the Orient movement that is really beautiful to look at. One of the things I also want to mention is the lugs of the watch actually have holes in them, which make switching out straps for this watch very easy. So I love it, and if I had to recommend someone a entry-level piece or a piece to get started, I definitely recommend Nomos. As I mentioned, there'll be links in the show notes of this podcast for all the things that I've spoken about, so you can check those out. I encourage you to see the photos so you kind of understand what I'm sort of going through. It's also some just really cool news. So check out the show notes. If you are new to Life on the Wrist, be sure to follow this podcast, and you can check out us out on all of our social media accounts. You can just search Life on the Wrist, and you'll definitely find us there. If you want to chat about anything that we've spoken about in this podcast, hit us up on Instagram. Love to hear from you. And if you are feeling generous and wouldn't mind rating this podcast, it really does help me out. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and until next time.